On this episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast, we talk about Golden Hour by Kacey Musgrave. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
We're two professional broadcasters. We like metal, and we like to talk about it, but for a few weeks out of the year.
8 weeks out of the year,
8 weeks out of the year, distanced apart from each other in March and September, we like to talk about things that are not metal, different from the things we would normally talk about.
Right.
But music that we like nonetheless. And last week when we recorded, I didn't really have any ideas. And then as soon as we were done, I was like, you know what? I like Kacey Musgraves well enough.
Sure.
Let's listen to the album Golden Hour.
This quite wasn't what I expected, because I hadn't listened to it. Like what I've heard of the radio is all I've heard. I was not expecting necessarily this.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where if you were only familiar with the fact that, like, oh, Kacey Musgraves, she's a young female country artist who's won a ton of Grammys. I feel like there's an expectation people would have going into this album if that's all they know, thinking that it's going to sound like, you know, everything else that comes out of Nashville these days. And this really, really, really does not.
It does not. You know, okay, here, let me just sum it up for you. Here's what I felt. I felt like a lot of times she was channeling the easy listening catalog from the Eagles through Sigur Rós.
Yeah. Hey, no, that's not, I don't think that's completely off the mark.
Right.
Yeah. I think that, I won't say it hits the nail right on the head, because I feel like the nail is hard to hit on the head.
Right. There is no head to this nail.
Her music is, I mean, I won't say completely unique in the sense that I'm sure that there are other artists out there doing something similar to her, but there aren't ones that I'm aware of, simply because this is definitely not my typical genre of music. But I really appreciate her take on modern country, and we'll talk more about Kacey Musgraves later in the episode. First, how are you doing,
I'm doing
friend?
Fantastic. Life is good.
That's good.
It was a good weekend. Went camping this weekend.
Yeah. How'd that go?
It was great. I won't tell you all about it.
Lake Metagosh.
Up at Lake Metagosh.
Metagosh,
as they say across the border.
Yeah. Is that how, do they actually say that in Canada?
Metagosh.
Metagosh? Oh, wow.
And here in North Dakota, we say Metagoshi.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is. What about the Canadian? Is it, well, because
I speak a different language. They speak Canadian up there.
That's true.
Right. Well,
I imagine Metagosh is I imagine it is a native word of some persuasion.
Yeah, right.
I imagine. So Chippewa probably.
Likely, yeah, because a lot of that's
the tribe that lives in that area.
Right.
So I don't know what it means. I don't know how they would say it.
The Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa.
Yeah. I'm not sure how it's meant to be pronounced. That's one of those, it's like Skakawea, right? Like some people are like, you know, it's supposed to be Sacagawea. And I'm like, yeah, I know that was the woman's name, but it's a place name of a geographical feature. If you want people to change the name of the lake, then I don't know, file some kind of a thing. But for now, look at the map and it says Sakakawea.
Hey, Tucson. Did you ever notice that your wife's name?
Sounds like Sakana Wiener.
Sakana Wiener.
Tucson and Charbonneau was a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
Apparently, to the degree that even the colonizing imperialist white men who he was guiding, I believe he was drunk most of the time.
Sure.
Because Sacagawea did most of the work. But anyway, even fucking Lewis and Clark didn't like the guy. From at least from what I remember, I'm like, there's so much that like I've filed away about Lewis and Clark because that was every single history class my entire childhood. We had to have a bit about Lewis and Clark because I'm from Washburn, North Dakota.
Right, and you worked at the museum or whatever, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a museum there. There's a reconstruction of Fort Mandan, which is where they spent the winter, their first year on the expedition. So like, yeah, it's deep. It's deeply rooted in. It's the only thing in my town besides the speed trap.
Sure. And I suppose
and a boat dock
and coal workers
and a bridge.
Yeah.
There's three things that Washburn is really known for: the speed trap, the fact that it has a bridge, and a Lewis and Clark museum.
Right. Well, the power plant's not too. Well, I guess the power plant's in Stanton, isn't it?
There's across the river in Stanton and then in Underwood.
Oh, sure. But not in Washburn.
It's not theoretically in Washburn. I don't know what Coal Creek's address says. I think it probably says Falkirk, actually.
Well, what is the distance between here and Washburn?
Between Minot and Washburn?
Yeah. Because that distance, whatever it is exactly the amount of time it takes to process a liter of Mountain Dew into your bladder. Because I have pissed in your hometown more times than I can count.
I think it is, I want to say it probably a little less than 100 miles.
Is it 100 miles?
It might be. I think it's, no, it can't be that. It can't be that far.
No.
I think it might be 100 miles to Bismarck is what I'm thinking.
It's 114 miles to Bismarck.
114. So yeah, I think it's a little. I think it's
a little over halfway to Bismarck.
I think it's somewhere around 70-ish because it takes a little over an hour to get from Minot to Washburn.
If you're going the speed limit.
Yes. I believe one time I calculated it is roughly the entire length of Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater. So I think it's about an hour and 7 minutes typically if you're going the speed limit.
Cool.
Which if I remember correctly is the length of Metropolis Part 2. That is the most me way to measure time possible. Is how many Dream Theater albums is it to get there? How many Dream Theater albums is it to get to Wyoming? Oh, it's about 12. It's about 12. Yeah, it's about 12 Dream Theater albums.
So it's Wyoming. Yeah, you'd have to you go to South Dakota and make a right.
Yeah.
Actually, you go to the bottom of Nebraska and make a right.
I guess it depends on what direction you go. Oh, yeah. Wait, I was thinking of Denver. It's 14 hours to Denver.
Right, because you go to Valentine, Nebraska, and you hang a righty.
At least when the last time my family drove to Denver, we probably lengthened the trip a little bit. We went through Spearfish.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that lengthens your trip, but it's a more pleasant trip.
It's a more pleasant trip until you hit the border with Wyoming.
Then there's nothing.
You haven't left the Black Hills yet, and somehow that like sepia tone that they put on everything that's set in Mexico. Wyoming, at least. When we drove through there, it was also October, so it didn't help. But at least when we drove from South Dakota into Wyoming, it was like a gray filter got put over the world.
Wyoming is sepia tone. I mean, the entire state. I mean, even when we went to my second wife and I were going on our honeymoon a year into the marriage. We went south from Yellowstone. We went down to Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
And even though the Tetons are right there and very majestic, it's like it's the only feature.
You look the other direction.
Yeah, you look the other direction and you can just see sadness all the way across.
I shit you not. If you're going through Spearfish Canyon, the moment you cross the border into Wyoming, there's a sign that says "Welcome to Wyoming." Immediately behind that sign, after miles and miles of beautiful Black Hills chateaus, immediately behind the sign for "Welcome to Wyoming" is a dilapidated shack. like one of those classic barns that you see along the side of the road all over North Dakota as well that haven't been maintained in years and are falling down.
They've been abandoned.
The wind has pushed down. There's an abandoned shack. At least that's what I remember. Immediately behind the sign for Wyoming, and then you're going through Western Wyoming is beautiful. Eastern Wyoming it might as well be Mars, but with some pronghorn.
Yeah,
it's Mars with some pronghorn and sagebrush. Other than that, they're identical.
Right.
Yeah, it's. I feel like I've talked about this before on here. I'm sure my hatred of Eastern Wyoming, but it's just like people. I feel like as a lifelong North Dakotan, I need to have at least one place that I'm aware of and that I have been to that I can point to people and be like, no, this place is worse. Trust me. Like, I gotta have that. I gotta have at least one example of some place that North Dakota can shit on. And even then, it's only half of a place.
Right. The eastern half.
It's only the eastern half, because Western Wyoming is beautiful. Like,
right.
From, you can like draw a line from like
Montana
or from like Gillette south.
Sure.
Everything west of there, beautiful.
Right.
Eastern
Wyoming is a tomb.
It's like we went through some towns,
right,
in quotation marks, that were like 4 trailers, one of which had some neon on it because it was the bar.
This bar is single wide.
It's like how? It's like there are third world countries that have more life in them.
I mean, where is the money coming from? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know what people do for a living in those areas.
Why are you there? Is it a witness protection? Are you in WITSEC?
I did watch a video talking. I can't remember what the conclusion was, but they were talking about like what is the disconnect between Colorado and Wyoming? Why? Because they're not that different, geographically and physically. The mountains stretch a little bit further east in Colorado than they do in Wyoming, but ultimately they're not that different. Their climate is not that different. I can't remember what the conclusion was, but it's like, why are there so many people in Colorado and so few people in Wyoming? Like, why do these neighboring states have such a massive contrast in population? And, it basically, to explain, went through the entire history of both states. But I do not remember the conclusion, which is the important part. But it's an interesting question to raise again of like, yeah, why is that?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be a geographic feature because, I mean,
they share most of them in common.
Right. They do. And what I'm saying is, a lot of states border on like this river or this mountain range or, this actual feature. But you can tell that that's not the case with Wyoming.
Because they're both just square.
It's a straight fucking line. I mean, they're 4 corners.
They're both just fucking squares.
Right.
So, yeah, it's I don't remember what it was. I think there was something about soil quality, but I think it was mostly due to like legal reasons for certain places being more attractive to settlers and that sort of thing. I can't exactly remember. And at what point Colorado really started to outpace Wyoming population wise.
Right.
But at some point I'd love to go back to Yellowstone.
I love Yellowstone.
I haven't been to Yellowstone since I was a teenager. And then we drove through the Tetons down to Jackson Hole in like a day. And I'd love to take some more time to actually like explore that area, because we spent a long time in Yellowstone. And then we stopped for like an hour along the Tetons and didn't really like explore anything.
I was going to say I haven't been there since you were a teenager either, but that's not true, because I just did the math. You would have been 10 years old the last time I was there.
It's double digits still.
Sure.
You're not that far off.
Right. Yeah. No. You'd have been 11 years old.
11 years old.
So we were there in 2007.
I see.
Because we were married in 2006.
Okay.
And we waited for the baby who was born 5 days later.
And then you went to Yellowstone.
Yeah, we waited for the baby to be, weaned, because we were leaving the baby with my mom, and
I see.
She's not lactating anymore.
I would imagine so.
Right.
But yeah, I'd love to go back to the pretty part of Wyoming at some point. I do. There's some other show, because for a while there's a show called Longmire that takes place in Wyoming.
Yeah, which I would never want to go to that area. Because so many people get killed there, apparently.
There's some other crime show my mom was telling me about that apparently takes place in Wyoming. And
I enjoyed Longmire. I watched it.
What I saw of Longmire, I liked it. But my mom was telling me that and like the show Yellowstone and all that, like all these crime shows that happen in Wyoming. And it's like, if all of these shows were combined and took place in the same real version of Wyoming, the entire state population of the state would have been murdered.
They'd all be murder victims. Every last one of them.
Every last one.
Northern Wyoming is worse than Cabot Cove.
Or whatever. Well, no, I was gonna say or whatever town Dexter takes place in, but that's in fucking
Miami.
Miami.
Yeah.
But yeah. But still, like I remember seeing some statistic about like what are the chances that any person in Miami is actually secretly a serial killer if you go off of the statistics from Dexter.
Yeah.
And it was everyone has a pretty high chance of being a serial killer in Miami.
Really?
If you base it off of the statistics from the fictional television series Dexter.
Right.
Trying to think if I've done anything. I did start because I went to audiobook follow-up. I went to Barnes and Noble today to see what they had for Warhammer books, because I remember a while back being at Barnes and Noble looking at the science fiction section, and this was like when I had only just started getting into Warhammer, and I was like, holy shit, that's a lot of books. Look at all these books, all from the Horus Heresy. That's insane. I went to Barnes and Noble today. There was like probably 10 Warhammer books total.
Really?
The only Horus Heresy book they had was the first one.
What the hell?
For some reason. I was a little shocked. Like, you guys definitely used to have a pretty massive selection of like 40K books, and now they had nothing. So if I want physical copies of those books, I'm going to have to buy them on the internet, and that they might be pretty expensive, because if they're not on Amazon, then the only place to get them is directly from Black Library. And because they're owned by Games Workshop,
they're $90 a piece.
Fuck my wallet right in the ass.
Your wallet has an ass?
It sure does.
Wow.
Well, it's made of leather, so it did have one. It did have ass at one point.
At some point. Or it might come from the ass.
Maybe it's a fruit leather wallet.
I would eat that.
But in any case, yeah, apparently even if something isn't made out of plastic or resin, Games Workshop will charge you out the wazoo for it. So,
right.
I will see if I can.
If people will pay it.
Up. Yeah. I'll see if I can scrounge up those books. That, or it's like, there is a part of me that's just like, what if I got an ebook? But it's like, I'm not gonna. How much money are you gonna spend just because you want this one thing? Although that might be I would get maybe a little bit more out of it, because digital copies is probably the most efficient way for me to stay up to date with Berserk, now that it is like back in publication and there are, new issues coming out monthly.
But you want physical copies of those.
I do, but I would also like to not wait months and months and months to read the new stuff.
So you're going to buy it twice, essentially, then?
Probably. Well, not every issue. What it would be, okay, new issue, that's, 15 pages because it's a manga.
Sure.
New issue comes out, buy that, download it, and then, a year later, when a compilation of all of the chapters from that year, then I would buy that one.
Gotcha.
So that's probably how I would do it.
So you buy each individual manga as they came out?
Yes. Each issue of it. It's like issues of a comic book.
Sure.
But yeah,
then when the anthology comes out.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The next deluxe edition I already pre-ordered months ago. Should be hopefully arriving in November. I don't know when that is gonna, like, if that will be more or less up to date. I imagine, unless there's a lot more fluff in this than I thought, than I'm thinking there will be. I think it will go at least up to date to the original creator dying, and perhaps a little bit beyond that. But I don't know, because they didn't start making the deluxe editions apparently until he died.
Really?
Because every copy of my deluxe edition has an in memoriam to the original creator on the final page.
So everybody at the company was like, "Oh shit, we got to suck as much money out of this as we can."
I guess so, yeah. Because they're the Dark Horse deluxe editions, because they've I don't think they've always been the English distributor for Berserk, but they have been, at least for a long time anyway, the most significant English language distributor for it.
Dark Horse Comics.
Dark Horse Comics. What else has Dark Horse done? Done a number of other. I think
Dark Horse. Did they do the Watchmen? No,
I think they may have. I was for a second I was thinking about The Walking Dead, but all of Kirkman's stuff is Skybound, I think.
Right.
Dark Horse.
Make sure you spell that right.
Comics. What would I misspell it as?
If you put a W in front of horse.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Horse. Let's see. What's Wikipedia got to say about their most famous comics, huh? Sin City, of Hellboy,
course.
Yes. 300. A lot of Frank Miller stuff.
Sure.
And then Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Really?
There's apparently a comic book for that, and a number of other things for their Western comics at the very least. Yeah, Hellboy and Sin City, probably the big ones.
Sure.
I didn't realize. I watched some video about the making of Sin City.
The movie?
The movie. And like how innovative their filming techniques actually were
at the time
for like trying to make this like ludicrously stylized black and white movie, trying to make it look more like the comic book and everything, and how they brought in, is it Sin City's Frank Miller, right? Yeah. How they brought in Frank Miller.
He actually worked on it.
Actually worked on it directly. And he's like, I don't know how to do film. And is it Robert Rodriguez? Who's the other director?
I think it was Rodriguez. Yeah.
Who was like, you already, like, you know how to frame a shot. You know how to frame a camera. Comic books is just storyboarding. Like you know how, trust me, you know how to do all this stuff. You just haven't done it yet. Like it's the same skill set, basically. You already have an eye for composition and multiple, camera frames and that sort of thing. You just haven't done it yet. And I because I haven't watched Sin City.
You haven't watched it?
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
Oh, you definitely should.
And seeing that video made me, because for some reason it was in my head as like, as being like more on the level of like, not that 300's a bad movie, but more on the level of like, being kind of cheesy or something like that.
I mean, there's a cheesiness to it, but it's clearly intentional.
Yeah. And watching that video about how it was made me go like, I should actually really watch this.
You definitely should watch that movie. Did you not like 300? You thought it was cheesy?
No, I like 300 just fine.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a very bombastic film.
It is.
And
intentionally.
If you, if Zack Snyder's classic speed up, slow down style of filming bothers you, then that movie's going to make you sick.
Yeah.
But
you're gonna need a bag.
Like it's so incredibly stylized and everything that it's one of those movies that I feel like holds up really well simply because of how stylized it is, because it uses like so much CGI.
Right.
And like there are a number of really heavy CGI movies from the days of yore, aka like 15 years ago, that don't hold up very well, simply because they were trying to go for photorealism and
didn't have the technology yet.
And like in it, even at the time, we may have gone like, wow, that looks really good. But now we've seen so much better for like photorealistic CGI that we go like, oh yeah, that looked like ass. And it's the same thing with video games too, where like something that goes for a really stylized art style over photorealism is almost always going to hold up a lot better than something else. Like BioShock, the original BioShock still looks pretty darn good today, just because it leans really heavily into this sort of stylized art style.
I remember it was recently at my 12-year-old. He was like, what movie is that from? What from? This is Sparta. Then he kicked a thing. I said, wait, have you never seen that movie?
300.
We're watching a movie right now. I'm popping some corn.
How did that go? Because that's I mean,
it's a rated R movie.
Yeah, it's definitely I I was gonna say that's a hard R. That has some connotations to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is like a fairly hard R rating movie. Like there's some nudity, there's a ton of blood. It's not because it's also not very realistic.
It's
blood.
Not right. And you know the thing is, I would be more concerned. First of all, I want to watch him with him. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I'll watch it with him, and then he can go, "What are we looking at?" And I can explain it to him. And but that's really not an issue.
Yeah,
because he plays all the video games.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've watched him play video games. I've watched him play video games where I've gone, Maximus, just so you realize, what you just did for the last half hour are the actions of a psychopath. You know that, right? He said, Dad, it's a video game. I'm like, I know, and you know, and I know you know.
We just gotta make sure. We just gotta check in.
Just check it in. You curb stomped an old lady and stole her car.
Look, 12-year-olds are all psychopaths.
That's true.
13-year-olds
are the worst.
Yeah, everyone knows 13-year-olds are.
Ha ha ha
ha! That man has feminine hips. I'm sensitive about that.
Yeah. John Mulaney.
Just tweens, early teenagers. They're terrifying.
They are.
They're it's a terrifying age, especially if there's more than one of them.
Yeah.
You know they're just judging you because they're smart, but they don't have empathy yet.
They don't. They don't have all the tools, but they've got a. Oops, sorry, kicked you. They've got a taste of the power of self-actualization, but they don't have the tools for it yet. So.
Yes, they know how to use the words that will hurt you, but they don't quite understand how badly they hurt.
Right.
Children. Son turning into Clint Eastwood.
Get off my lawn.
Gran Torino. I haven't watched Gran Torino.
Also a good movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty darn good movie.
Yeah.
Gran Torino and $1 Million Baby. I haven't watched $1 Million Baby in a very long time.
I've never seen that movie.
I only saw parts of it when I was young. I remember being bored because I was a kid and did not have an appreciation for slower movies at the time. And that I feel like that's the vast majority of at least the good parts of Clint Eastwood's directorial filmography is they're good movies, but also unbearably slow at times. If you are a younger person with little attention span,
let me tell you what you need to do at some point. Probably in the near future, is watch Clint Eastwood's directorial debut.
What was his directorial debut?
It was a movie called Play Misty for Me.
Oh, I think I've heard of this.
You're a disc jockey. You should watch that fucking movie.
Okay. For some reason, I thought Unforgiven was his directorial debut. Did he direct Unforgiven?
He did.
Yeah. I've watched that movie a bunch of times. I love Unforgiven.
That's a great movie.
It's a fucking awesome movie. But yeah. I'm trying to think of other things to talk about before we talk about Kacey Musgraves.
I don't know. I mean, what else has gone on? I mean,
nothing else. We don't need to talk about anything else, but I don't know. I just like to share things that happen in my life.
As I love to hear them.
But sometimes awesome. There's nothing happening in my life.
I hear you.
I picked up my boogie board. There's nothing written on it.
Yeah, it's a crutch. It's your crutch.
It's my crutch.
You can't do this without your crutch.
Now I will fill my other hand and set this board on top of my cat. So, let's talk about Kacey Musgraves.
All right.
So Kacey Musgraves is an American country music singer. She has been making music since, let's see here. She has been making music in some capacity since about 1999, since she was a kid.
Yeah.
At least, going off of the years active statistic on her Wikipedia page. She's from Golden, Texas, which I imagine Golden is what lends, perhaps part of what lends its name to this song. Of course, the golden hour is a time of day.
Yes, it is.
A part of the sun,
right after sunset. Yeah.
But that might also be, she's from a town called Golden, Texas. Like, come on. This is her, what number album is this? This is her fourth studio album. But it was kind of in some ways considered her big breakthrough.
Well, it's from 2018, right?
Yeah, this was from 2018. She had been making music for a while, like I had mentioned. But this was, I feel like, what really put her on the map for a lot of people. I think partially just because she won a whole handful of Grammys for it.
Right.
Let's see here, the album and its songs in all four of their nominated, won in all four of their nominated categories.
Wow.
Including Album of the Year, not
country album
best
of the year.
Country album also.
Yeah.
But Album of the Year, best country album. The first two singles won awards. Butterflies won best country solo performance, and Space Cowboy won for best country song. She also won Album of the Year at the 52nd annual CMA Awards, which I feel like, and I read an article about this a couple years ago, about how it's almost surprising that she won anything at the CMAs, because she kind of is in some slight opposition to like the sort of traditional country establishment in some ways. In the sense that like the only song of hers that has ever gotten any significant airtime on our station, which plays, the big country hits, the big, modern country hits. Rainbow is the only song off of this album that got any appreciable time on our stations. And I was reading an article, and, someone was talking to her people about how she basically just, she and her people don't give a shit about country radio. They just don't care.
Sure.
They're not trying to get their songs on the radio. They're not trying to make their songs appeal to radio stations or the people that listen to them. Streaming and album sales are good enough for them. And I kind of like that because, as someone who's I haven't worked in radio for a very long time, but all of the time I have worked in radio, has been as part of a business that, where 2/3 of it is country radio and modern country radio. The vast majority of that I don't fucking care for.
Right. Because it's not made for you. It's made for somebody who wants to consume just cookie cutter, well inside the box material.
And there's some of it where you can tell, and it's usually stuff that we don't end up playing all that often, but there's like some artists where you can tell, like, number one, they're singer-songwriters, and number two, they're not really trying to make something like mass market appealable. Like everything Eric Church has put out in like the last 5 years that has ended up on the station usually doesn't end up like sticking around very long, because it's usually kind of fucking weird.
Yeah, kind of weird. I mean, he's really trying to expand his.
He's doing something different,
right?
And I appreciate that. And then you've got guys who just seem like pretty straightforward. They're not making the really popular shit is your Florida Georgia Lines, your Kane Browns. It's the really fucking lazy like rap infused country where it's all the clapping and snapping beats, and
all the themes that are just all the same themes.
Like there's that the bro country fuckheads that I just don't fucking care about. But then you've got guys who are making an insane amount of money, but also are just making very straightforward classic country music like Luke Combs.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's not classic in the sense that it's like country western, but it's like he's not infusing it. He's not trying to like, oh, let's put a little bit of hip hop in there. It's like, no, it's just country music. And he's just a big good old boy who's just making some country. And he's making a fucking insane amount of money.
Right.
Everything he makes hits number one. But then you've got like country artists. We you got into the weeds there.
All right.
But we've got like, one of the things I love about Kacey Musgraves is that it just seems like she's making music for her.
Right.
And it's pop country, but I feel like today pop country, is what you think of coming out of Nashville, but this is pop country. This is country that actually gives a shit about the pop that's being infused into it.
Right.
Where it's almost more, it's almost more, there's more emphasis on the pop than the country. And it's like spacey and dreamy in a way that I really appreciate.
There's a lot of minor keys on this. A lot. I mean, there's a lot of things. And there was more than one time, and I was listening to this while I was doing my dishes because that's what I do.
Yes.
I can't do dishes without headphones.
Exactly.
And I'm doing the dishes more than one time. I just stop and go, nope, don't,
chin up. Nope, stiff upper lip.
You're fine.
Think of England.
Think of England. Grandma naked.
Think of the Queen.
It's fine.
You must do it for the Queen. We must hold out against the Huns. Jerry won't let it. Jerry doesn't get our tears. Do it for Churchill.
Yeah.
I feel like it's there's a level of I feel like genuine is the adjective I would use to describe this album and her music in general. It's been a little bit, but I have listened to her newest album at least once all the way through, and I like that quite a bit. And that one's darker than this one because they kind of exist as a pair. Because Golden Hour was, I think she had recently gotten married, and it was sort of written in kind of the honeymoon phase of that relationship. A lot of songs about a semi-idealized, version of her relationship with her then husband.
Right.
And then before her most recent album came out, they got divorced. And so that
there are bookends.
Yeah, there's kind of some bookends there, and that album is consequently a fair bit darker and a little bit more bleak than this one is. Does this album slap? Would you say?
I mean,
not in the way that we normally
not
qualify
in the way.
as
Yeah, this is not
slapping.
The grindcore on this album. It's kept to a minimum, right?
Yeah.
So, but it is one of those things that it slaps in the sense that
it's good.
That's fucking great. Yeah.
Yeah. Her. I mean, like the instrumental arrangements are all wonderful. Her voice is just it's incredibly soothing. I would say, like, she just has this a very, very beautiful singing voice.
Right.
And we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how she's kind of got this thing going on where it's like a little bit of it's a little bit of like young Dolly Parton thing going on in her voice. She's a lot less heavily accented than Dolly is, a little bit less of the vibrato than Dolly Parton generally had.
But there's the sweetness is there.
Yeah, there's a sweetness, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. There's something about her voice that just feels very sweet. And her whole deal feels like bringing back some of the classiness of old country. There's a level of class to her music that feels almost in opposition somehow. Not that the subject matter is deeply different, but it just feels, compared to the cookie cutter radio hits, it just feels more honest about those same subjects and somehow feels a little bit less trashy. maybe that's just a bias that I have associating modern pop country with kind of trashiness, but it's an association and a bias that I can't quite shake.
Yeah, I feel like it's been earned a bit.
Yeah, I think so. I do, part of me feels a little bad about immediately making that association, but also it's kind of like, it's kind of true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in any case, there's something about Kacey Musgrave's where it just feels a little classier. I don't know, in a way that seems to be a callback to, like, I mean, think of Dolly Parton in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like, and I was talking about outfits as well. Like a number of pictures I've seen of like Kacey Musgraves on stage. She's always wearing some just insane loud outfit that feels like it would be at home and for like so many of the big name like female country singers in the 70s and 80s. Or like Shania Twain kind of continued that forward for a while of wearing just crazy outfits.
I feel though for some reason that there's a disconnect there though. If the loud outfits and then listening to the music.
Yeah.
This music. I mean, it's not like completely serious at all. But
yeah.
but it's a lot more
low
subdued.
Key.
It's low
subdued.
key.
Yeah. She just seems to have a lot of a number of idiosyncrasies that she is not interested in hiding.
I can appreciate that.
Which I definitely appreciate that. I mean, across art in general, I find that one of the things I appreciate more than anything else, no matter what medium it is, one thing that I appreciate in art is a level of truthfulness and commitment to being honest, the artist clearly being honest with themselves and what they want to do and a commitment to making something that's more than just a product.
Right.
That's something that I will always like.
So in a sense, we could say that Kacey Musgraves is exactly like The Residents.
Yes. In every possible way.
In every possible way. Very, very similar.
What's your favorite song on this album?
I mean, Rainbow's such a great song.
I know. I like that. Okay. What's your favorite song other than Rainbow? Because I was going to do that for myself.
Yeah.
Of like, because I was going to be like, okay, obviously Rainbow's my favorite song. But other than that, my favorite? So what's your favorite song other than Rainbow, if you can think of one?
Well, the one that the first one to make me don't lose it was Mother, but
yeah,
but the one Space Cowboy comes directly after that, right? Yeah,
Space Cowboy's
fucking
really good.
Great song.
Yeah, that's also just the name of the song and how it's worked into the lyrics is like, that's novel, and how has no one thought of that?
That's clever
before. That's very clever. Maybe someone has, but I haven't heard it, and that felt like a very clever way to use the term Space Cowboy.
It's gonna make me listen to Steve Miller differently.
It makes me want to rewatch Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, or the movie Space Cowboys.
Or the movie Space. Hey, back to Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, there you go.
But I would say probably I would agree with you on Space Cowboy. I also Velvet Elvis is just a fun song.
That is a fun song.
That song is just so much fun.
Never Gonna Take You Down.
I also like Love Is a Wild Thing. That's also a good song.
Beautiful
as well.
song.
This is I feel like this album is just, I can just put it on and it will, this is a mood lifter for sure. This is like, if I don't feel particularly good, particularly well, I can put on this album and I will be uplifted a little bit.
I agree with you. I feel like there's a lot of people who this might bring down.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
But let's make a note here that another album he puts on to feel good is Mirror Reaper by Bell Witch.
Oh yeah. I think there's something to be said also is if you're in a bit of a down mood, there's something to be said for something that can feel a little bit cathartic.
Right.
And like, I think there's like so much of the rest of the album, you know, is a little bit lighter. Rainbow is definitely one of those songs that's going to get the waterworks going. But I think in a way that feels good and feels kind of like, all right, get it out. Come on, you're ready to get it out. Exactly.
It's like you got a sneeze cut in your nose and Kacey Musgraves is the pepper.
Exactly. So yeah, it's I feel like from front to back, you know, listening to the songs in order and ending with Rainbow is kind of a mildly cathartic experience.
Right.
It gets you ready to cry at the very end.
I almost called my mom.
His mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good. So Kacey Musgraves makes some darn good music.
Yep.
And I would recommend listening to her newest album as well. But I figured if the two of us were going to talk about one of her albums, we would talk about the one I've listened to the most.
Right. And here's the fun part. It's two dudes in Minot, North Dakota. Yeah, we're gonna give you the thumbs up there, Kacey. You know, it's not like you didn't win Grammy for Best Album of the Year with this thing, but I mean,
it's not like you don't have just a shelf of Grammys.
Exactly, but not now. You have our approval.
You have our approval. And that's what really matters.
Yeah,
these two hairy white dudes. Yeah, we're in the spare bedroom of this dingy apartment
in South Minot.
You got it now. You're gonna go far, kid. So, what medal do you bestow upon this album? I'm asking out of Chewbacca.
It's a gold medal.
A gold medal for Golden Hour.
Yeah,
I agree. So next week, our last week of September, what do you want to talk about?
We're going to take a severe left turn from this.
Okay.
We're going to listen to the second and I think final album from the band Big Black.
Okay.
Songs about fucking.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that. Songs about fucking.
Yes.
Okay. Libsyn is going to be like, do you really want that as your title for that episode?
I'm sure you could probably slip an asterisk in there.
Well, it's also, I do tag every episode as explicit. So okay. I feel like we'd be fine from that category. So next week, Songs About Fucking by Big Black.
Hi, Kale's mom.
So until next time, go ahead and follow us on Facebook or X. That is if we're still on there because
I have no idea.
Because fuckface
oh yeah
has decided he's going to start charging people money to use it because their ad revenue's down somehow.
Yeah, I don't know why.
What could have caused all of that? Why are advertisers no longer interested in advertising on his site? I wonder.
You know, and one thing he said also is that there are too many bots and you know, only real people will pay money to keep their account.
Yeah.
Whereas fake bots that are free won't.
Yeah. Ugh. It just, like, it's at this point, I don't want to credit this man with any level of cleverness.
No.
But you couldn't ruin a multi-billion-dollar company more. Like, it feels like it has to be intentional. It feels like he's trying to drive this company into the ground as disastrously as he can and make it as embarrassing and as drawn out as possible. It really feels like it's intentional. To what end? I don't know. And if it is intentional, I'm not saying it's smart, but it feels like he's doing it on purpose at this point. I don't know.
You know what sucks is that like a couple of years ago when I was still on Twitter, I actually had some famous people I would interact with.
Yeah.
And I was pretty happy with that. And then suddenly it was like, eh.
It's just a bad site. So just abandon social media entirely.
Entirely, except for your podcast app.
That's not really social media.
No, it's not.
So go ahead and subscribe to our feed on whatever podcast service you're using to listen to us right now. Do it. Go ahead. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Bronze Metalist Podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
Congratulations.